Good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining us today for the launch of our 2012 UK Salary Guide. By way of a brief introduction, I'm Claire Kemsley, and I've worked for Hays for many years, and I'm currently the Director of Hays Marketing. I'm joined today by Mike O'Brien, who is the CEO of JAM Partnership, and Corey Kamkos, the PR Manager at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen. To kick off, though, I will first talk you through the findings of our 2018 Salary and Recruiting Trends Guide. Please note that today's presentation will be recorded and available to view on the Hays website shortly after today's presentation. This is the fourth year we've produced our UK Guide, covering over 9,000 salaries across 12 specialist areas throughout the UK. It is based on salary information provided by 1,900 recruiting experts from our 94 UK offices. As well as using our own extensive insight to inform the guide, we also launched a survey designed to ascertain employee satisfaction, employers' concerns, and gather general insight into the market. This secured around 17,500 responses from employers and employees, of which over 600 came from our marketing professionals and employers. To start, let's set the scene by quickly recapping last year's overall UK findings. In 2016, prior to the EU referendum, 62% of organisations across the UK, and indeed across all sectors, expected their business activity to increase. 73% said they were planning to recruit. There was a 1.8% average salary increase, and 62% of employees were considering moving jobs. However, against the backdrop of continued economic and political uncertainty, and in the face of an increasingly tight labour market, we are here to look at how the employment market is faring for the marketing profession today. Let's take a look at what our results showed in a bit more detail. Let's start with the positives. Marketing employers are optimistic about the market and their business. Last year, just over two-thirds of marketing employers expected their activity to increase in the next 12 months. This has dipped slightly this year to 62%, which is just above the overall UK average of 59%. Reassuringly, though, the vast majority of marketing employers continue to expect activity to increase or stay the same. That's pretty much in line with the overall UK average. This is a very positive indicator about the overall health of the UK economy. Although there is obviously ongoing uncertainty, employers' business outlook remains robust. Reflecting this continued business confidence, employers' plans for recruitment and investing in their people strategies have grown. We looked at organisations' plans to recruit over the coming 12 months, and positively, over two-thirds stated that they were planning to recruit over the coming 12 months. This is a decrease from 77% of marketing employers last year who said they planned to recruit. This reflects a trend where a number of employers are taking a more strategic approach to hiring, following recent months of investment into their marketing teams. Employers are taking stock of their current team to identify any skills gaps and are recruiting professionals with more niche skill sets to fill these gaps. Despite this slight decrease in hiring, though, it clearly remains a top priority for marketing employers. Of these employers looking to hire, 58% state that they plan to hire permanent staff, and a quarter plan to hire temporary, interim or contract professionals. This indicates that permanent hiring is a more long-term view of employers at the moment. Despite this positive outlook, and employers charging ahead with both business and hiring plans, they are faced with huge recruitment challenges. In fact, we may currently be in one of the toughest recruitment markets in recent years. Let's take a look at what our results showed in more detail. Let's start with maybe the obvious but still pertinent point regarding skills shortages. Skills shortages are ever present and intensifying in the marketing profession, especially in the area of data and analytics. 69% of marketing employers say that a shortage of suitable applicants is their top recruitment challenge for the coming year. It is also evident that skills shortages are having a significant impact on organisations and are likely to continue to do so. Three-quarters of employers stated that they have experienced moderate to extreme skills shortages, and of those, 10% labelled them extreme. Only 2% of employers stated they had not experienced any skills shortages at all. This is being driven by the need for technical skills in particular, which are becoming increasingly in demand in the marketing profession. Here we can see how many marketing compared to other professions, many of which are suffering similar shortages. In fact, 77% of all UK employers say that the shortage of suitable candidates is their #1 recruitment challenge. Looking more closely at the skills most in demand for marketing employers, apart from marketing skills, data and analytical skills, are most highly sought after by double the percentage of the UK overall. This need for data and analytic skills within marketing is being driven by the number of employers investing heavily in digital transformation projects, thanks to the increasing prevalence of marketing automation. As a result of this, we have seen salaries increase across a number of related roles, including digital directors and customer insight managers. Moving away from the data side, leadership and managerial skills are also in demand. And there is high competition for those managers able to display strong leadership skills, people development and strategic thinking to help develop those teams as well as meet key strategic deliverables. For those employers looking for skill sets that typically come with experience, looking to other approaches to hiring may be pertinent during skills short times. For example, hiring temporary, contract or interim workers may hold the answer to filling skills gaps in the short term in order to meet peaks in demand. Greater investment in development and training in order to hire and consequently upskill more junior candidates or apprentices should also be considered. Whilst we have previously mentioned that the long-term aim for many employers is to hire permanent staff, the skills shortage is causing nearly half to hire temporary workers in the short term to overcome immediate gaps in skills in their organisation. The need to upskill their current workforce is also a consideration, with a fifth of marketing employers saying they have increased their training budget in order to address the shortage of skills in the short term. Being able to provide training can be a strong attracting tool for employers. So if training is available, be sure to clearly promote this to prospective candidates, especially given its role in enabling marketing professionals to develop their very own career. The opportunity to develop professionally is an important aspect many marketing professionals consider, and marketing employers may face exacerbated skills shortages if career progression needs are not met by those individual marketeers. 59%, nearly 3/5 of marketing employees, say they expect to change roles in the next year, of whom 37% expect to move in the next 6 months. A key influence on this decision to move may be linked to perceptions of career progression. We have seen an increase in the percentage of marketing professionals who feel there is no scope for career progression at their current organisation, rising from 50% last year to 54% this year. This feeling of a lack of career progression is the main reason for almost a quarter of employees to want to move role. This is an especially pertinent point as the recent Hays What Workers Want report found that 87% of marketers consider themselves to be ambitious. That's almost 10% higher than the overall UK average across other professions. Should this upward trend in the number of employees feeling there are no progression opportunities continue, this could further influence employee movement in the future. Although employees should take ownership of being proactive about progressing their career, it is important for employers to also play their part in helping to develop the careers of their marketing team. For example, employers can leverage this desire for progression by clearly publicising opportunities for career development when recruiting. If promotion opportunities are limited, lateral movements to other roles in marketing can also be considered, which can not only broaden the professional's expertise, but can also help to alleviate skill shortages, depending where employees move to. Such perceptions are causing dissatisfaction amongst workers. Combined with a lack of salary increases, employers must consider what else they can offer marketing professionals in order to continue to attract the best. The average salary increase for marketing roles has been 1%, which is in fact below the overall UK average salary increase of 1.8%. Looking closely at these salary increases, we can see that the areas of marketing receiving the highest average salary increases were those in insight roles, which reflects the increased reliance on data being experienced by many marketing teams. Customer insight managers and research managers, for example, saw an average increase of 2.6%. Online and digital professionals saw increases of 1.5%, again linked to the increased focus on digital, causing there to be a greater need for professionals with those skills. Digital directors saw above-average increases of 3.1% in the last year. General marketing roles round off the top three, with professionals receiving an increase of 1.1%. Despite below-average salary increases, there has been no change in salary dissatisfaction, remaining pretty consistent with last year's percentage of 56%. Of those who say they are considering leaving their current organisation in the next 12 months, 31% state that it's due to their salary level, which is just under, actually, the overall UK average of 32%. In order to maintain employee satisfaction and increase chances of retention, employers need to properly benchmark their salaries to the market rates and begin to investigate other means of increasing job satisfaction. It is not all about salary, though. For marketing professionals, our recent What Workers Want 2017 report showed that 71% of marketing professionals were willing to take a pay cut for a better cultural fit, which is a greater percentage than the overall UK. Maintaining a positive work-life balance is another area outside of salary which is an essential factor for employers to consider as part of their recruitment and retention strategy. Encouragingly, current employee ratings of work-life balance are largely positive, with over two-thirds of professionals giving a rating of good or very good. This is more than 10% higher than the average UK of 56%. Over a quarter of marketing employees value work-life balance most when considering a new role, indicating the importance of maintaining and further improving employee sentiments when it comes to work-life balance. There is still work to be done, though, as mismatches are still present between what employees deem important compared to the benefits employers offer. For example, 3/4 of employees state that flexible working is important to them, but only 61% of employers offer this benefit. Similarly, receiving over 25 days of annual leave is rated as important for 73% of marketing employees, yet only 45% of employers offer this. In such skill-short times, progressive employers should consider and enact policies conducive to greater work-life balance for their employees in order to be seen as an employer of choice and attract the top talent. In what has been a whistle-stop tour of some of our key findings, I'll just take a few minutes now to summarise the key findings of our report. First, we have seen that despite the wider economic uncertainty caused by the UK's decision to leave the EU, employer confidence in activity for the year ahead remains positive. As a result of forecasted activity, recruitment remains a top priority for most organisations, with a particular focus on hiring permanent employees. However, acute skills shortages look set to be the key challenge for employers, especially in the digital space. In order to meet business objectives and alleviate pressure on staff, many employers will hire temporary professionals. In such a skills-short landscape, employers need to consider how best to attract and retain top talent. And it is clear that in addition to salary and benefits and total packages, a positive work-life balance is important to the majority of candidates. Firstly, we recommend that you make workforce planning a key strategic priority. Despite the positive sentiment that we see from organisations with regard to their current activity and plans, skills shortages remain prevalent in the market. Workforce planning needs to be a core component of every business strategy and at the top of the agenda. Understanding the range of workforce solutions available and considering the most appropriate options, factoring elements beyond just immediate people needs, but also risk mitigation and cost management, will help employers to put in place the most effective strategies for both the short and long term. And this will enable employers to mitigate the effect of the skills shortages while continuing to meet their ambitious activity targets. Secondly, invest in your employer brand to compete for talent. Ensuring that you have a strong employer brand has never been more essential, given how prevalent the skills shortages are. Competition for candidates has intensified, and employers should target their offering to appeal to the specific type of candidate they want to attract. Having a strong employee value proposition is central. Salary levels need to be benchmarked accurately and positioned correctly. Then progression opportunities and training investments need to be publicised. Employees, marketeers want to be able to get an insight into what it's truly like to work at the organisation, so they can assess whether they might be a strong fit with its culture. So make sure you clearly promote any benefit your organisation can offer, which helps achieve and maintain a positive work-life balance. More employees are actively seeking this information, so employers need to ensure they have a transparent message that is easily accessible online. Finally, utilise contingent workers for more than just projects. Employers' drive for growth is putting significant pressure on employees, driven further by the high amount of skill shortages. Employers should reconsider their approach to hiring temporary workers. Whereas traditionally temporary contract and interim workers have been used to supplement projects where specific skill sets are required, or maybe to overcome peaks in demand, they could be used to a greater extent to help alleviate some of the pressure from the increased workload. This will help to ensure the growth plans can be sustained and targets met, while improving the job satisfaction of permanent employees. And on that note, I'd very much like to welcome Corey, who will discuss the salaries and skill trends in public relations. Corey, welcome.
Thank you very much, Claire. Hello, everyone. As Claire mentioned, my name is Corey Kamgoz. I'm the Public Relations Manager at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations. Just as some background, I've been at the organisation for around 5 years. Prior to that, I was working for a corporate communications agency in New York. I have a Master's in Media and Communications, a Public Relations Diploma, and I'm also a Chartered Public Relations Practitioner. My role fundamentally is focused on overseeing our communication strategy, but part of that responsibility focuses on articulating policy and research, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to kick off with a little bit of an introduction into the CIPR and explain a little bit about who we are and why we exist. It was fascinating to hear Claire talk about the different trends and areas of growth, and many of the key findings match up very closely with our own research. So I'm going to be talking about some of those and exploring those themes in more detail. And finally, and to finish off with, I'm going to speak about flexible working and the gender pay gap. So, firstly, we are the Royal Chartered professional body for people working in public relations in the UK. We were founded in 1948 and we're the largest membership organisations for PR professionals in Europe. We have more than 10,000 members, primarily in the UK, but also in more than 85 countries worldwide. But fundamentally, we exist to advance professionalism in PR. And we do that by making our members accountable to our code of conduct and by raising standards of practice through training, qualifications, awards, and the production of best practice guidance. As I mentioned, one of the things that we do is run a piece of research every year called the State of the Profession. It takes in the views of more than 1,500 PR professionals on everything from diversity and recruitment to skills and salaries. And as I mentioned, it's very interesting that a lot of our research findings match up closely with the Hayes study, so that's what I'm going to be focusing on primarily today. So the first thing that stuck out for me from the Hayes study was about the demand for new skills. One of the things we do in our research is track the way people spend their time, and that's critical in public relations because the boundaries of our practice aren't always clearly defined. You can see from this table how respondents spend their time, and the column on the right shows how that's changed from the previous year. I think the list of tasks and competencies are a testament to the way in which marketing and public relations and advertising have converged. And it gives you an overview of how people working in public relations spend their time. So, for example, on point number 13, you can see that 35% of PR professionals now spend most or some of their time on photo and video creation and editing. And that represented a 7% increase on the previous year. So it's easy to see where the areas of growth are, and that was certainly one of last year's biggest rises. Similarly, on point 4, you can see 66% of respondents say digital and social media management accounts for most or some of their time. That was also increased by 3% on the previous year. We train around 2,000 PR professionals a year, and we have a whole range of courses, but one of this year's most consistent performers has been the CIPR's Making Movies with iPhones course. So I think that represents, or I think that reflects the overall shift to visual forms of communication taking place across the media industries. One of the other things that struck me from the Hayes research was the skills shortages. So we asked recruiters to pick out the skills that they look for in junior and senior recruits, and you can see the results of that question on this page. So, for example, you can see the top skill sought by recruiters hiring junior candidates is traditional written communication, and similarly for senior candidates, it's leadership and management, which Claire also mentioned in her presentation. Digital and social, you can see, is the third largest or the third most in-demand skill for junior recruiters. That's interesting, and that kind of reflects the trend that we're seeing across the industry, where digital and social skills are still very much regarded as the remit of the junior candidate and the junior professional. And I think that's a trend that needs to shift, and we need to see social media and responsibility for social media being embedded across the organization. Even though it didn't make the top 5, it was very interesting to see that in our research, 65% of recruiters hiring senior candidates look for evidence of financial management skills, but only 3% of our respondents rank those amongst their strongest skill set. So it's interesting to see where the skills gap lies. And similarly to the Hayes study, we also found that data analysis is something that our members are struggling to grapple with. Just away from this, a side point, I think there's traditionally been a perception of PR professionals as being good with numbers, but not so hot on, sorry, good with words, but not so hot on numbers. And I think that really needs to change if communication professionals are going to deliver strategic value and a seat at the boardroom table. Claire spoke about the impact of work-life balance, and it was fascinating to see how that is being kind of more closely regarded as a key issue for both employees and employers. I think it's fair to say that marketing and communications have reputations for their always-on culture. For public relations professionals particularly, that's partly due to the 24-hour news cycle and the immediacy of social media. And I think because of that, there's an expectancy on us to be available at all times, especially during a crisis. And if you add into that the rising cost of childcare, then you have a situation where businesses are placing unrealistic expectations on employees, which can ultimately have a negative impact on business itself. So what flexible working can do is give employees varying degrees of flexibility on how long, where, when, and at what times their employees work. And that flexibility can be in terms of working time, location, or indeed the pattern of working. And the benefits are there for businesses willing to embrace change. One of the things that was interesting to read from the Hayes study is that organizations are struggling to keep hold of talented staff, and offering flexible working helps build employee loyalty and reduces churn, and is a key driver in retaining staff. Flexible working can also improve morale, motivation, and boost productivity. There's been lots of talk recently in the news about how the UK can improve its productivity, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that improving work-life balance allows people to give their best at work, and that ultimately impacts productivity. And finally, from an organizational perspective, good companies attract good people, and treating people well and treating your employees with respect and giving them options with regards to flexibility is good business practice. Now you can see on the screen that there are some recommendations. I'll come on to those in a moment, but I think there's a key point that needs to be made about flexible working, and I think as an industry we need to shift the narrative away from flexible working being regarded as the same thing as part-time work. Providing the technology is in place, people can work at all times of day and night, and as long as they're meeting their objectives and delivering value, there shouldn't be a need for them to be physically present in the office every day between 9 and 5, and I think that's an outdated approach to business. Flexible working can actually boost productivity, as I mentioned. People can save time commuting, and they can be available at times when customers need assistance outside of office hours. So a couple of years ago, the CIPR produced flexible working guidance, which was about removing some of the obstacles to implementing flexible working, and it included these 9 recommendations. And we're keen to help our members understand how these can help employees and help businesses themselves. So if you're interested in finding more about this, do go on Google and search CIPR Flexible Working Guidance, and you can find out more about that. You don't need to be a member of the CIPR to access that. As we're talking about salaries predominantly, I thought it would be appropriate to finish off by focusing on the gender pay gap. So the conversation around gender pay in society is certainly growing louder. It's now a legal requirement for all those with for all companies with more than 250 employees to publish their gender pay data. I think that general conversation has been helped by stories like the BBC revealing the differences in pay between their male and female presenters. And as an organisation, the CIPR has focused and campaigned strongly on this issue since 2014. It's particularly important for us because public relations is roughly 2/3 female, but despite that, it's still led by men occupying the most senior roles. So the gender pay gap is a very concerning reoccurring trend of our research. And as you can see from the slide displayed at the moment, the average difference between male and female earnings is £12,316. It's important not to take the figures at face value, however, because gender pay is an extremely complex and nuanced issue, and there are a whole range of factors that can influence salary, from sector to seniority or prevalence of part-time work. So to understand how gender truly impacts salary, we undertake what's called a regression analysis to consider how all of these factors impact pay. And what that analysis does is reveal that the true gender pay gap in public relations is £5,784. And that's a figure that can't be explained by any other factors such as part-time work, graduate status, seniority, or indeed any other factors that are taken into consideration in the survey. So from our point of view, it's a very serious issue. And depressingly, it means that gender is the 3rd largest factor to influence your public relations salary behind seniority and length of industry service. It's also important to bear in mind that the gender pay gap is massively influenced by seniority. So up until manager level, the gender pay gap is more or less non-existent, but beyond manager, as we go towards head of communications and director level, it skyrockets. And that's certainly reflected when you look at the highest earners. So in public relations, men are more than twice as likely than women to earn over £100,000. Only 5% of women earn over £100,000, whereas 11% of men do so. And it's because of those figures and that disparity that the issue is so important for the industry, and as a result, very important for us at the CIPR. And it's one that we are continuously campaigning on. And that is the end of my presentation. So I think I'll hand over to Mike.
Capacity here today is that as Mike O'Brien, I'm the lead tutor for the IDM courses. That's 17 years working as a specialist across the entire range of courses for the IDM, literally from beginner's guide courses into essentials of digital marketing through to the postgraduate level, in which we take on the most senior managers and help with everything through to digital transformation, how to organise the business around things. So as the session this afternoon has pointed out, thanks very much to Claire and Corey for picking on some really interesting things, which I hope to pick up from a practical point of view. I'm here to set the scene basically with some key marketing insights and current trends and prediction perhaps where the market is heading over the next few years. And if it's anything like my first 40 years of working in the business, I'll be shocked if it is anything like it. The fact is marketing has changed more in the past few years than the previous 100, and it's now basically us in the foothills of an exponential rate of change in the way that we go to market and where the customers and clients are able to engage with each other. Regardless of what GDPR does, the fact is we're going to have to learn to deal with smaller and more niche audiences rather than this kind of generic push to market that we've had for many years. And if I'm going to look at some particular aspects to give a framework of what I'm talking about going forward, it's in particular looking at training and retraining of digital professionals. We aren't actually classified as a profession. There's a lot of on-the-job training, lots of people coming from different skill sets. In fact, lots of different skill sets are required in order to understand how to deal with the psychology of consumer behaviour, etc., never mind the technological issues which I'm going to talk about going forward. And if you like, the main theme here is to look at the disruptive challenges of automation, machine learning systems, etc. And my main theme that I'm always talking about at trade shows is the human integration aspects of things. How do we improve personal productivity? Because there's one thing I can tell you from experience, there's no amount of expenditure in technology will replace a highly developed sense of skill and experience in the marketplace at the moment. It will not make bad marketers better. You still need to be both at the same time. And ironically, there's a great deal of research to show at the moment that the more automated your systems, the more people are actually employing in the meantime, just to cope with this whole newfangled way of doing things. So I'm also going to look at the nature of the mix and match roles and streamlined workflows and systems designed to cope with demand for instant gratification amongst consumers, because that's definitely where we're going, which is having a huge effect on agency relationships as we push towards what I've determined, as what I've given a name to, basically, is the age of real-time micro-marketing machines. Let me start, first of all, by giving a sense of perspective. I think this is a really interesting quote from Alvin Toffler, who's an American futurist, who said a little while ago that the illiterate in the 21st century will be those who cannot read and write, etc. It's those who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think in the age of the way I train marketers these days, certainly, is there are two schools of thought. One, do you go down the highly specialised? And as Claire pointed out earlier on, if you want to live in the moment at the moment, perhaps having data and analytics skills are important to you. They're in shortage, so there's a good chance you get a higher pay increase. But the truth is, lots of those types of jobs can be modelled and repurposed and given over to algorithms, etc. So there's an issue as to whether we go for a short-term result or trying to think more long-term about how it is we engage in the market. Now, the good news is that 1 in 5 business leaders describe their company as a digital business. 43%, in fact, say a lack of digital skills is a barrier to transformation. Again, Claire's research seems to justify that. But I also think that the fact that most people are kind of a little bit disgruntled, a slightly higher percentage in digital marketing perhaps than others, 82% of employees expect digital to change the way they work in the next 3 years. And that's a difficult thing to live with. If you think that doing your job well is tough enough, having to do someone else's work, understanding how other players and agents in this structure are going to change things for you dramatically. Just look at the effect of WPP at the moment and the way that business is organised. There's huge pressures to build separate agencies for clients such as Unilever. They've brought in-house a great deal of work in the last few years. And that is not just about a skills issue, that's a cultural issue for lots of people. And I think the key thing that Alvin teaches us here, which is quite a good point to round this slide off, is that what got us here won't get us there. You know, the way the world is going. And one of the biggest issues that we have to face with is that technology is changing at such a rate. This is the Chief Martech Lumascape Marketing May 2017 cut. Now, they've been doing this since about 2013. If you look at the 2013 deck on this, there were literally about 300 to 500 companies on it. There are now 5,000. And one of the biggest issues we got in our obsession, our neophyte obsession with changing and adapting new technology, is that we need to find new ways of enhancing human productivity, and perhaps one of the ways that the substitution of capital for labour is a very attractive route into that particular solution, because we've got systems that might reduce human error and work at optimal levels 24 hours a day, never ask for a pay rise, and certainly work through Christmas and holiday periods, whilst the rest of us are looking for a balanced life, as Corey quite rightly pointed out. And this is leading to a huge increase in complexity in jobs and a huge imbalance in this, what I call this codependency between us human experts and this magical solution that technology is supposed to offer us. So whether we're just basically pretending to do marketing automation from an email point of view, or we're going fully integrated in which we've got this single point view of the customer, GDPR permissions apply, of course, in that context, or whether we actually have the resources and skill sets in place to create one single unified experience, a customer experience across all of our channels. Now, some of the research at the moment, whilst we're dealing with digital, says that we may have maybe a dozen or maybe 8 or 9 at the most seriously used channels to go to market. But the truth is there are actually, one audit which is done by David Seeley, 129 different channels we can currently use and go to market, which is causing a huge amount of problem for us. Now, the second rejoinder to this is also that we are experiencing, mainly because of mobile phones, switches to tablets in the evenings and weekends, experiencing absolutely catastrophic disintegration in how we can attribute the pathways to purchase that consumers are taking. At the moment, we can do a bit of first click and last click analysis. We can hire some very specialist algorithms to kind of do some predictive analytics about what on earth would happen in between. But the truth is, even in some really simple purchases, there may well have been more than one person involved in the process. And so what we try to do is build these hyper-complex systems which start to look at the customer's complete journey. Now, if you just look at this graphic for a few seconds, what I've got is a classic buyer behavior model from left to right, basically from casual interest at the top left where nobody knows us, through to an ongoing sustained relationship in which lifetime value becomes a critical factor in the process. And right at the end there, we've got a whole range of tools, literally from media choices that we're going to make. And you can see all of these little boxes have lots of different tools across them, which we're trying to use to engage with customers. Down here in the lower third, we're looking at what customers want, what we want from a business, and what automation may provide in the process. And in the bottom down here, what we've got are tools and partnerships. Now, the issue with this is not that any of these tools aren't any good, but that it may take up to 2 years to discuss which are the appropriate tools to be using, and another further 2 years in order to build them into the system to make sure that we can actually use them. And that is at the heart of our struggle with transformation. Now, whilst everybody talks about it and is very excited about it, the truth is those companies that can fully afford to integrate the system, whether they be huge multinational banks or small to medium-sized enterprises, frankly, which are more flexible and can change more rapidly, it's a people, process, partnerships and purpose issue. And the key issue here is that the people process issue is that we don't have enough people. We're under-resourced in social media, in PR, in email, in landing page optimization, conversion rate optimization. It's a huge issue for us. Many of our processes are radically out of date and out of sync. Consumers often have more high-tech technology than we do because it takes ages to onboard it, etc. And the last couple of factors here, our partnerships with agencies are under pressure like never before. A lot of agencies are suffering because they're not being used on a kind of monthly ongoing rolling contract basis, but on a need to do the job basis and move in and out. The purpose and issue of our businesses are often driven by economic certainty during the current market complex, which is becoming more difficult by the minute as we speak. That's not to say that I don't really appreciate, as Claire mentioned, and Corey, the optimism that us as marketers have to have in order to believe that tomorrow will be better because we're going to find new ways to engage with the market in a more efficient way. Now, our struggle with automation, personality and productivity is basically, the chart here just shows some salaries and bits and pieces which are not irrelevant. It's the job titles I'm interested in. Anything from customer-facing account managers to highly specialized digital skill sets require a particular level of experience that we're probably not getting from university graduates who have to come in and learn on the job, which is hideously expensive and difficult to do. And we currently rank 22nd in Europe for our investment in training across the board, just behind Lithuania. And the problem with that is that there are 16 different categories of jobs I've looked at with 4 different levels of pay, etc. And the gender inequality is a huge issue, considering that 70% of digital marketers on the client handling side are female. That is something that really needs to be sorted out. So there's no work-life balance or joy to be had in that issue when people are putting more and more pressure, but just feel as though there's a big issue with pay, etc. And skill sets are just difficult to master in an environment in which it changes almost every 5 minutes. Now, my perspective, in a nutshell, is if I can put it all into one neat little graphic, is this. If you look at the first point there, the purple point, the micro-marketing model, it's basically 4 levels of data induction. So we've got induction, deduction, interaction, optimization, in which data is constantly being tied into individual customer activities, which means we need a new breed of analysts stroke marketers or marketers who are also analysts. Now, at the moment, just finding more analysts who don't really understand marketing is not going to be a solution. Google itself is adding in some information tools inside Google Analytics, which is supposed to fill in the missing gap, but that makes no attempt to understand what it is that marketers really need and how fast they actually need it. If you look at the other layer, which is coming out in black beyond the red layers there, what we've got is a situation analysis, which is highly complex and changing and shifting. So our 12-month plan may be a thing of history within the next few years. We may be planning on planning every single day. And for that, we need to work out what the actual transient key issues are, what our objectives are shifting against our business objectives and our customers' desire to engage with brands and actually download ad blocking software because they're just fed up with it. And our strategy, which, and I work with a lot in training scenarios in which people don't understand the difference between strategy and training. and tactical components. So strategy, for example, is looking at customer segmentation, moving into proposition for each of those segments, and then planning the customer journey. And on the tactical side, which is where most digital campaigns tend to obsess with, which is all about the channels, and then about the content that goes in those channels, and then thinking about how we get that made, and then vaguely having a stab at the budget, or fudget, as it's often been called when I've been in the room. And we then need to think further and in much more detail about all the granular activities in which we've got behavioural triggers from companies like IBM Silverpop that are starting to feed live data into how consumers are activated inside our business model. So we leave people alone in what I call passive-aggressive marketing, and then try and reach out to them when indicators such as retargeting, etc., indicate they're really interested in, and actually willing to listen to our message, as opposed to being targeted every 2 days, as certain clients do to me, in terms of email. Every 2 days an email arrives because it's driven by the customer need, as opposed to the consumer's desire to receive any information. And all these aspects, working our way through, looking at what the current context is in a daily changing scenario in which the data is integrated in the system, which changes the way we think about how we're going to market, which redefines how we're able to engage, and mainly focus on conversion rate optimization with smaller audiences who are actually willing to be engaged with, managing the entire process, bringing all the data together so that we actually make these little metrical analysis points that tell us this is what's working. Because research a couple of years ago by Adobe and Responses said that less than 9% of those professionals working in that industry feel totally confident they know what they're doing in our business, which is kind of really scary. And that's because the job is getting more complicated. So we look at some important factors that are really, really useful. Now, whilst specialist help is what we need in the short term, there is no doubt that in the long term, what we need is people who are completely polymorphic, polymathic, free of the silo, who are capable and desire to be curious about what everyone else is doing within the marketing mix. They also need to be resilient because, under pressure to continuously engage with learning, continuous professional development, realizing that the job that you did last year may actually not be required anymore because that's been automated, and yet you still have valuable skill sets that may be repurposed. I think we'll hear a lot about retraining and redevelopment of staff in the next few years. And I think this is part of this process of being polymathic, not tunneling yourself down into one particular line of work, but being able to develop those skill sets that are transferable across a whole range of different tools. I think the other side of it, and this is probably a big issue, for us as a business, is that there is one time in which we're really optimal and working the way I see things work in the future. That's when agencies, for example, are pitching. We throw silos in the bin. We completely work across the board as a single unit. We do what can be normally done in days, months rather, in a few hours, and move on really quickly. So I think this is really important to us going forward. I've got a question here from the floor here. The problem with digital training and retraining lies not just with recruiting new people to marketing and young breeds, but with senior marketers that want to educate themselves and retrain. How can an experienced marketer become a top digital leader? I think this is a good point from the question there. And I think this openness to new ideas, and I think the other side is the ability to act as a real leader. Now, what real leaders do is learn how to delegate responsibility, how to train and delegate staff and allow them to get on with the job, because decisions need to be faster. And there's two factors I'm going to use. Actually, it's a great question that leads me to two next points. One, embracing the monoverse relates to how consumers live in a world of their own making, basically. They will have a unique set of channels they respond to, they'll have unique goals, etc. And if you don't respond to those on a kind of one-to-one basis, and there was a great book written on digital marketing, sorry, it wasn't even digital, it was direct marketing, by Don Rogers and Martha Peppers in the late 80s, called The Future of One-to-One Marketing, in which they imagined a world in which we really could communicate with audiences on their own. And from my perspective, this monoverse requires us to really understand how consumers live at this epicenter of their own life, and it's our job to then work out when and where we really are permissioned to talk to them and to follow them in ways that we don't necessarily see it all. We've got a warehouse full of stock, and our job is just to shift it. It is to fine-tune our process to such an extent that we can actually do what Amazon are trying to do, which is to predict what might be the next purchase and then perhaps move that to a warehouse somewhere near the customer, but it doesn't always work out. And that risk is a huge issue for us. So there are a couple of things I think are really important, especially for digital leaders and for anyone else, frankly, in the business who wants to protect themselves. You need to work out, no matter what job you're doing, it doesn't matter whether it's analytics or whether it's actually in the forefront of customer relationships, to find out ways to reduce investment This is our job. Manufacturing has done this for centuries, found a way to increase productivity whilst reducing costs, and us in our infinite wisdom often find a way of making things more expensive. So my job primarily is to find a better way to do everything I do for clients. At the same time as reducing their investment, I'm hoping to increase ROI. All the data, all the analytics, all the campaign analysis should help me to do that. So one of the key factors here, and all clients are struggling with this, is how do they streamline the process to react to changing marketing context and more instantly, in real time if possible, because that's where things are moving because of mobile phone engagement, in particular with customers. We can now track you. We've got a velocimeter inside the phone. It's really useful. With the right permission, we can actually engage you when you are in proximity to buying occasions and trying to identify that and build permission relationships, which allow us to act almost like a concierge partner for you, as opposed to someone just trying to flog you stuff, is really important. Now, I think the other thing is, for business, all of us need to work out how we build organizations that are much more immersed in customers' lives, as opposed to on the other side of an equation that's just firing stuff at customers. I think we need to work out, and lots of clients that I deal with in training are trying to figure this one out, how do they become intermediary free? Now, whether that's Google or whether it's agency free is up for grabs at the moment. And there are things like blockchain which may enable us to be totally intermediary free of just about every agency that may come between us and the clients. And the last thing is embeddedness. What I mean by that is that we live in the moment. We kind of have this kind of mindfulness approach to marketing, as opposed to a set plan that we execute no matter how the market changes. We've got this kind of content strategy going forward over 12 months, and we hope that it all works out in our favor, rather than be able to think with a kind of publishing mentality, which is we're trying to publish on the fly. A couple of pointers I just want to finish on here. I hear a lot of talk at trade shows about everything is going to be automated and it'll all be okay. And I think that is a complete fallacy at the moment. You know, we're not going to go to this, although there are interesting philosophers, and I'm a great advocate of their work, Ray Kurzweil, example, who talks about the singularity coming in 2045, in which case, you know, machine intelligence becomes more important than us humans, and we can't even understand what it's doing. And I think there are companies that are trying to engage in that kind of research at the moment. But I think the real threat here is intelligent systems. And what I mean by threat is it may well teach us how to increase profits, but it won't necessarily teach us how to keep the kind of headcounts that I think are also important. We need people who earn money in order to spend money so that we can sell products to them, etc. And this huge research that's been done by the Bank of England recently, which indicates that maybe 20 million jobs, not necessarily workers, may be lost to automation system over the next 20 odd years. And these intelligent systems aren't as sophisticated as we'd like to think they perhaps are. The first time you drive an automated car, in fact you don't drive it, you sit hands on. Trust me, it's a hideous experience. Of the loss of control is breathtaking. And if I can carry that metaphor through into marketing automation, the same is actually true. There are companies that are like Baidu, Tesla and Alphabet, for example, that are working really hard on voice-activated systems that immediately do away with keyboards. We just tell it what we want, etc. And they believe now that they've got the technology that will replace a huge amount of humans at work doing a whole range of jobs. I'm not a particular fan of that particular mode at the moment. If you take that to its extreme example, this is a young man who a few years ago actually had an embedded electrode put into his brain so that he was colorblind at birth. There's a guy called Neil Harbison. He's one of the first official cyborgs in the world, so it doesn't look much like Terminator. And his idea is that he would be able to actually feel and sense color vibration, because he can't do that at the moment. And he's the center of the Cyborg Foundation, which believes the only solution for us in the long run as human beings is to become fully cybernetically enhanced to a certain extent. Well, actually, the truth is, where we're at the moment, despite the fact we're in the foothills of this huge exponential change in the way technology will enable us to become more productive as humans, it still needs us more than we do that. And what we're doing is feeding data into the system by every search we do, etc., which makes Google's AI a bit more sensitive. But just ask yourself this: how often do you actually come across something that is absolutely relevant to you if it isn't actually a mode of retargeting? And our ability, this is what makes us extraordinary as human beings, and this is what we constantly teach at the IDM across the board in our digital training things, is for your ability to think across silos, across boundaries, these combinatorially innovative capacities that we have to flex and change our skill sets, to keep developing a new sense of logic or understanding, or our ability to plan, which is actually a fundamentally important aspect of digital marketing. What should we do next, as opposed to what the pundits or the zeitgeist of a particular moment in time. Remember, we're all neophytes in this business is planning on doing. And I think this last couple of bits about creating this this connection with audiences in real time means we need to do a little bit more of this, which is, I think, learn how to persistently acquire and apply new knowledge and skills and set goals, because that is the very definition of intelligence, the ability to set goals. The ability for an AI system to just respond to things is not intelligence. It's our human, evolved over millions of years ability to decide what the agenda is and then solve complex problems that get between us and our goal that make us uniquely capable. And it's a critical factor of our training with the IDM. Now, one thing I can tell you for sure is that I have no idea what the future will hold. I am the IDM's futurologist, so I'm often talking about this. The one thing I can guarantee, it will be work, but it won't be as we know it. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to deal with these. And of course, I'll get Corey and Claire.
Mike, thank you. And Corey, can I thank you too? Both really thought-provoking and interesting conversations. And I think, as ever with the world of marketing, the complexity of our world of marketing today and the speed at which it's moving, I think is not only exciting, but also a real challenge when it comes around to the way that the job functions are changing, as you've reflected on, the job titles are changing, and Corey, the content of what I might do in my role today that may be different to what I might have done or been trained to do 5 years ago even, makes it a very exciting but challenging place to be. Thank you for answering one of those questions through your presentation, Mike. That was great. We have had a couple of questions in. I'll just take the first one or two, and then if you would like to send any more questions in for Corey and for Mike, please do so. We have a few more minutes left on the call. One of the first questions, there has been little overall change in salary increase in the last year. Do you think salaries will increase in the year ahead? Well, I think we're still faced with market uncertainty, and the full outcome of Brexit is obviously still unclear. I think therefore it's difficult to predict how salaries will change in the next 12 months. But what is evident, I think, is that the skills shortages will create wage pressure. So professionals in areas of skills shortages can continue to enjoy those significant salary increases, particularly in the digital world. Video content, for example, is another area that we're actually seeing a lot of requirement and not so much of a skill set available. And I think in some cases there may even be double-digit increases in the next 3 to 5 years on those skill short areas. But looking at the salary survey results, we have seen productivity has made a big impact on skills shortages. So if you take 59% of employers seeing an impact, this equally could affect their ability to increase salaries. So on the whole, I think it's imperative to look at other ways to attract and retain workers, as I don't necessarily think that increases in salary are going to be a given. And I think that's around the offering of the training, as Corey and Mike would say, you know, the professional relationships, the professional qualifications, the courses available from such organisations, offering that development opportunity is really important. And I do think this flexible working is just going to become more and more of a topic of debate. So I hope that has helped. There's another question here. It says, the skills gap is evident. It would help, however, to specify the level at which this skills gap is observed in the sector. In consumer marketing, for example, which business sector faces a skills gap? Thank you, Claire. Thanks for the question, George. Actually, I'd like to refer back to a piece of research we did later last year, called The Elements of a Marketeer, the core skill sets required these days. And in fact, they are quite distinct to answer the question, George. At the entry level, those graduates you touched on, Mike, coming into the environment of marketing, I mean, in their first 2 to 3 years, the biggest skills gap there actually are commerciality, really understanding where their role in marketing will impact and has an impact on their current business, and actually sector experience. You know, what is their sector like? What does the professional market service business look like? What does a manufacturing business, a consumer durables business look like? So those are 2 skill sets that are missing at that entry level in the first 2 to 3 years at the moment. Moving on, George, to middle management, I'm afraid it's analytics. The biggest skills gap across middle management in marketing is analytics, the ability to interpret data. And that in turn is leading on to one of the biggest skill shortages at the more senior level in director and leadership is actually strategic thinking, which you talked again about, Michael. You know, strategic thinking is not just the ability to understand where the business should go, it's how we're going to take it there. And creativity at the more senior level is also a skills gap that we've noticed is in very short supply. So hopefully that's a response for you, George. If you'd like a copy of The Elements of a Marketeer, George, please contact Hayes and we'll get a copy of that research to you. Are there any further questions for Michael Corey? Take this opportunity. to thank everybody for joining the call. You can request your copy of the guide on the slide that's there in front by hashtag Salary Guide. Thank you once again, Corey and Mike. That was really interesting, and appreciate your support. And the findings I think are going to just continue to become more interesting and actually offer up more questions, I think, than answers over the next 3 to 4 years. So thank you both very much, and thank you all for attending, and I hope you've all found it as interesting as I have. Thank you.
Thank you.